Good morning. My name is Mark Baldassare, and I'm President and CEO of the Public Policy Institute of California. Thank you for joining us today. PPIC is pleased to present this virtual program with California Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond. This event is part of PPIC's 2020 Speaker Series on California's future. As a public charity, PPIC does not take or support positions on any ballot measures or legislation and for local, state, and federal offices, or support any or oppose any candidates and political parties for public office. We would like to thank the sponsors of this series for their underwriting support. These organizations are listed on your screen and on our website. The series is also funded by PPIC Donor Circle and the PPIC Corporate Circle, groups of individuals and organizations that provide generous support to PPIC. Please consider joining us as a sponsor or donor so that we may continue to make programs like today's possible. More information is available on our website. Before we begin, if you have any questions for Superintendent Thurmond, please send an email to the email address on the screen. We've already heard from several people before our session here this morning. PPICeventquestions@gmail.com. We'd appreciate you including your name and organization along with your question. Today's program comes at a time of unparalleled challenges for the state and the nation. That's why we are so pleased to have State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, here with us today. Tony Thurmond was sworn in as the State Superintendent of Public Instruction on January 2019. He's also served as a member of the California State Assembly from 2014 to 2018, and on the West Contra Costa Unified School Board and the Richmond City Council. Thank you for being here today, Superintendent Thurmond. We will make the most of the time that we have available here today, and look forward to the conversation with you. You know, the last time we had a conversation was 2 years ago while you were running for State Superintendent in August 2018. You were part of a PPIC program. Obviously, much has changed since then, and none of us 2 years ago would have thought that the Superintendent of Public Instruction would be facing the issues and challenges which you are today every day in your job, and want to thank you for your leadership at this very, very difficult moment for so many Californians. So my first question is, from your vantage point, and I really asked this question with so many parents who I talk to in mind, how is the upcoming school year taking shape?
A great question. Thanks for having me on, Mark, and I appreciate all the great work of PPIC. You know, school opening is always a time that's exciting and stressful, but under these conditions, this is, in my estimation, this is probably the biggest challenge most of us will face in our lifetime. And it is a scary proposition because it's not just how we reopen society, how do we reopen schools for our children? And that carries great, great implications. I gotta say, right off the bat, I wanna give tremendous thanks to teachers and parents and students and school administrators and superintendents. This is not easy, and there's no playbook on how to do this, but I have been impressed with the things that our schools are putting in place, even at the same time having to acknowledge that there are still so many questions about what's going to be okay. And for those reasons, I think it's great that our schools are open in the most safe manner possible, and that's distance learning. At this point, 97% of our schools in the state are planning to open in distance learning. Many have already opened in distance learning. And so while we know that there's nothing better than in-person instruction as it relates to the needs of our students, that is the safest thing that we can do right now. We got to focus there, and we're working around the clock with our 1,000 school districts to help them think through guidance coming out of the state from the Department of Public Health. When is it okay to have in-person instruction? Making sure that they have personal protective equipment, making sure they have computers. Happy to talk about it throughout today, but the digital divide is unbelievable to me that it has existed this long in a state like California or anywhere in this nation. And so as we literally are opening and for other schools preparing to open, the Department of Education is leaning in to see how we help every step of the way to make sure that the resources are there, the safety protocols are there, and that we still work to make sure that our students are learning and supported.
Thank you. This, as I mentioned, there's a number of questions that have already come in, and this one is related, so I won't wait till later in our program. But Becky Morgan of the Morgan Family Foundation asked, I think maybe you partly answered this already, though, but what directions and guidelines are you giving to the 1,000 superintendents to guide their reopening decisions? How do you go about doing that?
You know, it seems like we provide guidance almost every week, and it changes. You know, months ago, which feels like a lifetime ago, I would say it was probably in June, we had announced formal guidance on how schools might rearrange classrooms and rearrange personnel. Since that guidance release, our circumstances changed dramatically. At that time, it looked like we were headed for a safe reopening of all of our sectors, including our schools. And so, as you all know, we've seen these dramatic rise in cases of infection and sadly deaths. And so that has halted everything that we've known till now. We've changed and modified our guidance on really how to help, you know, school districts focus on making distance learning as good as it can be, because we know that there have been some gaps in associated with, you know, some learning gaps associated with distance learning. You know, I'm grateful that when we moved into distance learning in March, people moved quickly, and they did that with no playbook, and they did that overnight to keep people safe, and that was important. But there were some bumps along the way, and so now as we head into distance learning again, our focus really has been helping districts figure out how to work through those bumps. A lot around how much live instruction time students should get, a lot of family engagement, a lot of work with computers. Happy to share any of that throughout today's broadcast.
Yeah, I think we'll probably be coming back to that. So if you think about this fall and then you think about early next year, where are we in terms of managing the pandemic, and where do you anticipate things will be as we try to, you know, find our way back to a new normal this year?
Well, the State Department of Public Health has created some guidelines that would allow some criteria for when schools can reopen. And they're very good. They're very scientifically driven. And it just says that when certain metrics are met, you know, things in the community, there's enough testing, you know, our capacity at hospitals, that it may be safe to reopen. The State Department of Public Health has also created some metrics for some communities that may be safe enough now for schools to open. It's hard to imagine that, but there are a few places in the state, you know, they may be more rural, they may be less populated. Their case infections have been much lower, very low. And so the State Department of Public Health has created some metrics for how there may be opening there, and even how schools may, in counties on the watch list, may be able to safely open in some small kind of pod-like environments. And so, you know, it seems like distance learning is the way to go for a while. We're gonna have to monitor and see what developments there are in the world. Will we see a vaccine? You know, many are saying we'll see a vaccine by January. That could be a game changer. But until then, we've got to prepare as if we may need to be in distance learning for a long time. And how do we offset the lack of social emotional support for students if they're in distance learning? And those are the kinds of things that we're focused on right now.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're planning for a scenario where we may be in distance learning for the foreseeable future. And then when things open up, then it's then it improve in certain districts, then it might be possible under social distancing and other methods to go back. So
that's right.
This is a very general question, but I know that you know, what advice do you have for parents today? You know, how do parents manage and cope with all this uncertainty?
It's very difficult. You know, I was on, you know, I'm a parent of students, and this week we had 2 back to school orientations, and they're all on Zoom. And I really, first of all, I want to commend the principals. I thought they did a great job, but they're doing a great job under what I think are the most unlikely circumstances, the most impossible circumstances. And it really speaks to, this is a really hard thing, and we've got to all lean in together. The advice that I give to parents is do your best. Just do your best. First and foremost is the safety of your kids, followed by how do we support them emotionally in their social emotional learning? We actually started a series for parents called, we created a virtual support circle series where parents could just come on and say, Tony, this is just too hard. I don't understand my kids' schoolwork. I'm balancing my job as well. This is just too hard. I want my kids back in school.
Right.
And we've had some great folks on to give them support. And we're working on some new strategies for our schools to be more accessible around family engagement. We want it to be that schools is a hotline that you can call if you don't understand your kid's homework or schoolwork or something stressing you out. And if it's stressing you out, put it down. Just put it to the side. Just make sure your kids are safe. And then we'll figure out ways to work together to get through the work itself and how to help families during these times.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So since distance learning is going to be with us for a while, for most of the 6 million California students, it's critical to make sure that all students have the technology, the resources that they need. And what do you see the state doing in terms of helping to close the digital divide? Because not everybody has what they need at home to learn.
Right when the pandemic started, I created a task force on closing the digital divide because we knew students needed devices. We knew that 1 million students didn't have access to the internet in this state. It's very sad. California has enough wealth and enough technology that this should not have been the case, but has been for decades. At the same time, the governor, the first partner, the state board president, and many others have joined me in asking companies for donations. We've secured all kinds of donations from internet service providers, reduced cost internet, high speed, reduced cost internet. We've gotten thousands of computing devices and hotspots, donated. It's just not enough. Just last week, I was able to get Apple and T-Mobile to work out a whole new proposal that would identify up to 1 million computing devices that are internet enabled, because now we're having a supply shortage, worldwide supply shortage for computing devices. We can't get them and they're all on back order. And so Apple prioritized our students in California. And then what we did is we introduced Apple and T-Mobile to our 1,000 school districts to say, hey, we want to get you together to make these purchases. The state has given our school districts money. It's a distance learning mitigation fund, and it gives money to buy computing devices and pay for some other things that are needed, like counseling programs and things of that nature. But it's just not enough. And so literally, I've reached out to 100 California companies to ask them all to give $5 million each. We need a minimum of $500 million to meet the needs of our students around devices and hotspots. And then that's just the immediate need. We're going to need a few $1 billion to build infrastructure in our rural communities that have no connectivity at this current time. And so we've made this a focus of my task force on closing the digital divide.
That's good. There was a question from Ariana Flelling from Redlands, California. Excuse me, Ariana, if I've mispronounced your last name, but saying, I know the Digital Divide Task Force has been working to address this issue for the current school year. But my question is, what is being done about the future? Because I guess this is the idea is that this has been with us for a while. We're trying to deal now with, the here and now, but it's an ongoing issue, it seems, to get students, everybody to have equal access. And how do you view this, having the task force? What's the work ahead?
Ariana, thanks for the question. When I named the task force, we said, we're going to ask for devices to get us through the pandemic. But I also said, we've got to go for the moonshot. We're going to use the task force to say, let's close the digital divide once and for all. I mean, it has existed for decades in California, and that's shameful. Our kids deserve better. And so there are a number of legislators who are on that task force, co-chaired with me, Senator Connie Levis co-chairing it, a number of legislators from across the state. Actually, there's some legislators from not far from the Redlands area. So we are also working with proposals in the legislature and legislators who have proposals that would generate the kinds of billions of dollars needed to build out the infrastructure all across the state, in Redlands, in our rural communities throughout the Central Valley, places where students can't even get basic broadband. And so what I'm trying to say is we're using the momentum and the urgency of responding to this pandemic to help us solve a problem that has been with us for a long time. And I believe that we can solve this in the near future and certainly in our lifetime.
Can you give us some sense about, since March, for instance, the last 5 months or so, what type of progress we've made in this arena? You mentioned there were 1 million students going into this who didn't have access, and where are we now?
Yeah, we're still, to be honest, we're still quantifying what
Yeah,
those numbers are, but I can tell you that, thousands, if not
yeah,
hundreds of thousands of students have been made aware of the ability to have reduced cost internet. In some cases, we're talking about internet programs, $10 a month that the
Mm,
entire family can have access to.
right.
And so I'm grateful to the internet service companies that have made this available.
Mhm.
We've leaned on them, to be honest, Mark. We put pressure on them to say, you've got to
Yeah,
promote this.
yeah,
Families have to know about this. And we
yeah,
put pressure on them to say, you cannot have, you can't make it hard for families to get a hold of it. And it used to be that they'd ask you about your social security number, they'd
right.
ask you about your financial history,
Yeah.
and all of that's been eliminated. Not only do they not ask you any questions, but
Mhm.
we've also gotten them to put together hotlines where families can call to get information about
Mhm.
accessing the reduced
Yeah.
cost internet. And so if anyone out there is in need of help, they can always get in touch with us at digitaldivide@cde.ca.gov. We can connect you to the right places. And to those who are following today's webinar, if you're helping families that need access to computing devices and hotspots or at free reduced internet, please make sure they understand that they never again have to give any kind of information like a social security number or credit history. And if anyone asks them that, you tell them to say that the state superintendent said, I don't have to do that anymore. Give me a call. We'll get that cleared up. We're making progress, but there's still a lot of work to do. If you just watch the evening news, you can see every school district is really trying to, close out, back orders. They're trying to equip students with computing devices. And what we're doing is just making sure that they know here are the places where the devices exist. We've gotten them to give discounted costs, and we've gotten the state to give money. I got to thank the governor and the legislature. They provided this mitigation, learning loss mitigation fund that gives money to districts to be able to purchase computers. It's a $5.3 billion fund. And that money is on its way to school districts now. And they all know how much they get, by the way. If school districts are here watching, our office can tell you exactly how much you get and when you should expect to have it in your district accounts.
Thank you. And as the state superintendent and leading the California Department of Education, you're probably in the best position to know what it is that we need from the federal government right now. Because
Yeah.
right, we're talking about the state and private industry and where you've gotten support. But as Speaker Pelosi and others begin to think about the next package, what are you looking for that would be meaningful for students in California schools?
Mark, I'm going to say this. We need more resources and less rhetoric. And our California congressional delegation has been incredible, led by Speaker Pelosi, really leaning in. They're really prioritizing money for computing devices and infrastructure. They recognize that school districts and cities and our local businesses need more support. I'm just going to be honest, Mark. I'm not trying to be partisan here because I know this is a nonpartisan conversation, but we don't need rhetoric that says that if schools don't open, that schools are going to lose funding. That's reckless and dangerous. That invites people to be in danger instead of saying our economy has been severely hindered by the impacts of the coronavirus. We need a stimulus package that supports small businesses in our community. Small businesses are the lifeline of our economy. And we need those packages to support those small businesses that are out there fighting for their very survival every single day. Our cities need resources from the federal government to provide basic services, and our school districts need them as well. We need less rhetoric, more resources. We need the federal government. We need the Senate and the president to get on board with what Speaker Pelosi has asked for. And that's a stimulus package that helps Californians, but helps all Americans. This isn't just a California thing. This is our entire nation is in need of these supports.
Yeah, thank you. Here's a question that just came in about from Oakland. Given the critical role schools have in supporting the social and emotional health of our children, even more essential given the forced isolation of COVID and the barriers for children's access to behavioral health support, what guidance and resources are being offered to school districts? Are there resources, for example, Medi-Cal, which could be more effectively accessed by school districts to offer needed support? I mean, I hear about social and emotional support and mental health all the time. Superintendent, and what schools have played when students are going to school, they play such an important role. They're not going to their school now. So, again, for Californians, what advice do you have on this?
It's true. The social emotional learning is so important, and this pandemic has just generated a massive increase in depression among students and adults. And so again, in some ways, there are many educators who believe that the most important thing we can do right now is attend to the social emotional learning needs of our students, especially in these first weeks of school where things are still kind of settling, right? And so, I've created this counseling coalition. I want to give a big shout out to California's school counselors, school psychologists, school social workers, the MFTs. They're all coming together to create kind of a triage to support our schools and our students. At the same time, the state, again, this $5.3 billion through the Learning Loss Mitigation Fund, schools can use that directly for social emotional learning programs. On the subject of Medi-Cal, I actually convened a hearing with all the state agencies that deal with Medi-Cal to say, how do we get more? California, as the biggest state in the nation, actually has one of the smallest percentages of return of dollars from the federal government on Medi-Cal.
Wow.
It's because there have been these barriers for so long. Schools have to have this match, and now the state is making it easier for schools to use some of their existing spending to qualify as the match for Medi-Cal dollars. So right now we're working with our school districts to leverage more Medi-Cal dollars for more counseling programs. There's some other federal programs that will provide more nurses. We know that families need help around special education supports, and we're working with our school district to do a better job in the delivery of those programs.
Thank you. Thanks. That's very helpful to hear. Related to all of these issues, we're also in the midst of an unprecedented moment of national reckoning concerning race relations.
Yes.
And I'd like to get your perspective on the role of the public school system in addressing racial disparities.
There's no question that education has a way of leaning in to address issues around race and racism and bias. And that's why I've launched an initiative where we're going to help create training for all of our school staff to deal with implicit bias and the impact of bias and race in our nation. And we started this campaign earlier in the year, but after the killing of George Floyd, it became just so incredibly clear our nation needs healing, needs open discussion around race and racism. And so we are accelerating our efforts to bring this implicit bias training to all of our schools. I also established a youth advisory council statewide so students could give their input on how they feel about these things that they're seeing on the evening news and these traumatic events around race and racism. And we were able to give support to the students, but they gave us a gift back. The students said, we should be doing more to make sure that students learn about the contributions of people of color, things that they don't get in their textbooks. They asked us for ethnic studies. So we created a mini series on ethnic studies. We launched it on social media. We had Dolores Huerta and the daughter of the late civil rights icon, Fred Korematsu, Karen Korematsu. There's a school in the Bay Area a few schools named after Fred Korematsu, one in El Cerrito, one in San Francisco. We brought on these great leaders to talk with our students about ethnic studies. We had Assembly Member Shirley Weber, who is a renowned professor in Africana Studies, kick off the series. We had professors in Asian American Studies provide us with just great talks, and professors in Native American Studies come together to talk about the importance of ethnic studies. Yesterday, we presented a curriculum draft to the state's Instructional Quality Commission on ethnic studies. This is intended to be a guide for how all school districts in California can create ethnic studies. There's even a bill in the legislature that would make it a requirement, a graduation requirement to take ethnic studies. What I'm saying is schools play an important role in educating, in creating new opportunity and new learning, in addressing bias directly, but schools can't do that alone. We need every sector to address bias, and we're leaning in both in schools and with our partners in police agencies and government and business to say we all have to address bias. We all have to work together across racial and ethnic groups. This is the moment our country wants healing, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that classroom efforts support the healing of our students and creating the partnership opportunities to work together across race, ethnicity, for the betterment of our communities.
Yeah. Many people are concerned that, and we talked about the digital divide, and where different households are in terms of their resources. They're concerned that uh, not just with the racial disparities that we have, but the ones that could become even larger as a result of the pandemic
That's
around
right.
health and economic issues, and some thoughts about the role of the school system,
Yep.
making sure that things don't get worse during
Yes.
distance learning, what we might do.
Yeah, some great organizations like PPIC have worked together to document the fact that there were some learning gaps for students like English learners and African American students and students who just weren't as connected to school as we might hope during the pandemic. And
Yeah,
so we have to take those learnings to help make distance learning a better. And as I mentioned, our office has put out some guidance, is putting out guidance that helps districts balance, you know, remote and online instruction in a better way. But we're
yeah,
also leaning in on doing some more family engagement, helping districts set up hotlines so that parents need help, making sure that materials are in multiple languages,
mhm,
recognizing that not all families have a computer. So we shouldn't tell families without a computer to send an email if they need help. Instead, we set up a hotline number that you can call. And some of this stuff sounds basic, but it will make a huge difference. The last part I share, Mark, is hundreds of thousands of students didn't check in for distance learning. Their
yeah,
whereabouts were unknown. It's
yeah.
why I created this counseling coalition so we could triage and build a kind of support, identify where those students are, what kind of supports do they need, help them get connected to resources. I'm grateful to some great organizations like the Alliance, which is a statewide counseling organization. They've
Mhm.
got members in Northern California, Southern California, at Central Valley. They can help to connect families who need to be connected to get connected. I don't want to underscore that there's a lot of hard work ahead of us, but I know that we can do this. We can do this together. We're leaning in with the knowledge of what didn't work well, and we're looking for ways to make sure that the experience is better for all of our students going forward.
Thank you. I just got a note that says that the superintendent needs to leave after this last question. So
They've, they've, they've been sending that note for the last 3 questions. I see it, and you and I are both going to be in trouble soon, but I'm hanging on there with you.
I just want to ask you one other thing, because I've known you for a while, while you were in the assembly, we met and so forth. And you've always been, a positive, upbeat person who's focused on getting the job done and making the most of what, what's in front of you and what needs to be done. So sometimes it's hard for people to think about any positives given the unprecedented challenges that are facing the state and nation right now. What gives you hope as you think about the rest of 2020?
Thanks for asking that, Mark. I don't want to ever suggest that any of this is easy or that it's ideal, because it's not ideal. And it's difficult, complicated, and messy the way our schools are opening. But I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the resolve and the
Mhm.
determination of our students and our parents and our educators. This is the biggest challenge that we're going to face in our lifetime, but we have to rise to the challenge. We have no choice but to do so. And the way we'll be successful is when we lean in together. I know that there's more questions than answers. I know that there's fearful things. I have fears too, but I haven't lost hope that we can still rise to mount this challenge that we face. And I know that we have to follow the science and do what's going to keep us safe first and foremost. We have to lean in together to take care of each other's social emotional learning. And while it is not the same and it's not ideal, students are always learning. And this is not the ideal circumstances, but for us to just suggest that we're not going to offer them anything, I do not think serves their best interests or ours. And so I guess that's my way of saying we make the most of what we have and that we work together, that we can do more together. We are stronger together when we stick together, and we will come out on the other side better. Now, obviously, this is just incredibly difficult. And I'm not going to sit up here and say that there are any easy buttons to push, because there aren't. But I still have hope. And that means that we keep working together. And I also know that there are things that we can control, Mark. I just got to say it. I think it's the obvious, but I got to say it. We cannot control what the coronavirus does, but we can control how we respond to it. And in that, there are certain things that we know that do help us flatten the curve and allow us to open up schools in a better way, allow us to open up our economy. And they're simple but proven, right? And so I got to say it. I'd like to ask everyone to continue to amplify the importance of wearing a face covering. I'd like everyone to amplify the importance of physical distance and to continue to amplify the importance of hand washing. These three simple things are proven. And, you know, some people question, is there any, I read a story about someone who questioned whether or not there's proof that wearing a face covering, prevents against coronavirus. Now, I think it does, but even if there isn't any evidence, what do we have to lose for wearing a face covering? Right? If it saved lives, I'm mindful of all the lives that we've lost, and I want to prevent the loss of life. And so I think that there is much that we can control in terms of how we respond and what we do together. And I believe, Mark, that we're going to rise to mount this challenge. We're in the thick of it, but I think that we're going to get through it together. And I'm hopeful for when we get through to the other side.
Your message gives us all hope, and your leadership is always very impressive, and I really thank you for your time here today during a very, very busy time for you. And so I'd like to thank Superintendent Thurmond for joining us today. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, and finally, everybody in our audience who joined us this morning. And if you pre-registered for this event, later today you'll be receiving a survey. We hope you will take a couple of minutes to let us know how we did. You'll be hearing about more programs as we go through the next few months, and we hope that you'll be able to join us for those as well. In the meantime, please be safe. Have a good afternoon and weekend. Thank you.